But the time that I really started to see it become more of a mainstream was really after 5th edition, and seeing it being streamed, podcasts being put up on it, and a lot of actual discussion being done about it. And part of that was indeed third-party content. So, Alex, I don't know if you're aware, but we do have a tendency to talk about a little game called Dungeons & Dragons on the show.
Once in a great while.
Okay. Well, there's been some chatter through the interwebs.
There's been a lot of chatter as of the last day.
And through like some third-party and dev teams that they're going on. Anyway, in a nutshell, lot of confusion, concerns regarding open gaming license as it is going to apply to 1D&D, and revisions that are being made right now from Wizards of the Coast, who create Dungeons & Dragons, obviously. That's an emerging story, and I'd like to get some opinions from some people that actually make it, because I've seen some people that we do know that have had various opinions about the framework and the terminology in it and what's real, what isn't. So I don't want to get into that right now, but if you are wondering about the subject matter, if you were to go on to a social media network of any kind and you were to look for Open D&D, you'll probably get a lot of the more up-to-date information or concerns that people have, because that's pretty much where they're doing hashtag Open D&D.
Right.
But I thought that what we would do here is give a little bit of an overview of what the OGL is in terms of Dungeons & Dragons, in case people are not aware. So, briefly, so everyone's aware, the OGL, Open Gaming License, version 1.0, was originally published by Wizards of the Coast in 2000. To license use of portions of 3rd edition content via System Reference Document, the SRD, allowing third-party publishers to produce compatible material. And so this allowed things like, even the mechanics of the game to be utilized as compatibility to the game itself. So this is where you get the rise of a lot of third-party publishers, like a Cobalt Press, for instance, or any of those, or a lot of people that we've had on the show who have made modules for the game. The idea was very popular, as we know. One of the biggest things that came out of it was Paizo creating Pathfinder, which still uses like the modified versions of 3 or 3.5 that was able to come off of that OGL. June 2008, 4th edition had a new, more restrictive though, but royalty-free license, which they called the Game System License, available for third-party developers to publish products compatible with 4th edition, but the GSL is incompatible with previous OGL. This might have been one of the reasons why 4th wasn't such a big thing. I don't know. Did you ever play 4th edition?
I didn't. I still haven't looked at 4th edition at all.
Yes. However, by its own terms, the OGL is irrevocable and remains in widespread use. Okay, that's Wikipedia. We'll see how well that holds up. Thank you. Thank you for that. We'll see about that. More on that later. So by 5th edition, though, 2016, it is weird to think that 5th edition has been out since 2016, but here we are. They released 5th edition SRD, which was under version 1.8 of the OGL, marking a return to the open gaming format. So now we're back. Additionally, content creators can access an additional license option by publishing through the Dungeon Masters Guild storefront. This license goes a step further by allowing individuals and third parties to create and sell content based on...
What did I hit?
Alex
don't know what button I just hit.
You hit the button that makes you disappear.
Apparently.
This license goes a step further by allowing individuals and third-party publishers to create and sell content based on specific Wizards of the Coast intellectual properties, like Forgotten Realms, and Ravencroft, Eberron, and even the Magic the Gathering planes. And they are allowed to set their own prices. However, Wizards of the Coast and One Bookshelf take a 50% cut of the profits, of the proceeds. Now, of course, that's specifically under the DM Guild. So, there is that. Now, you have made note several times on the show, though, that game mechanics themselves are not something that you can, like, copyright.
Not really.
It's
I'm pretty sure we've talked about this before on the old show, and people have brought it up before. Again, when people are like, "Oh, people are going to steal my game idea," it's like, no, people are not going to steal your game idea, and you can't copyright mechanics. You can pretty much full send, steal mechanics, borrow them, and use them.
Yeah, repurpose them.
Yes.
Recycle. Maybe that's what we should call them. Recycling game mechanics. So that's sort of like what the Open Gaming License is, and it was there to encourage third-party content for the most part.
It may be what the Open Gaming License was. We'll see what it's about to become, I guess.
Right. There's no telling if this is going to continue on, because we are getting the idea that it might actually be changing pretty dramatically. I will, however, read one thing that they said in relation to this, which was the move to actually create the Open Gaming License back under 3rd edition was spearheaded by Ryan Dancy. Dancy, in case you're wondering, was vice president in charge of Dungeons & Dragons at Wizards of the Coast. And he said that I think there's a very, very strong business case that can be made for the idea of embracing the ideas at the heart of the open source movement and finding a place for them in gaming. One of my fundamental arguments is that by pursuing the open gaming concept, Wizards can establish a clear policy on what it will and will not allow people to do with its copyrighted materials. Just that alone should spur a huge surge in independent content creation that will feed into the D&D network. I mean, he wasn't wrong. There was definitely a lot of content that came out from third-party developers. I think that all you really have to do is look on any place that sells RPG content, and you will see a lot of open source stuff that came out for Dungeons & Dragons specifically. There's a case to be made that one of the reasons why D&D is still popular today has a lot to do with the OGL and with third-party content. Is that a fair assessment in your...
Yeah, again, Critical Role and other streams and other third-party content have played a huge part in the resurgence of D&D.
Right, and if you're talking about like a Critical Role, which actually utilizes Dungeons & Dragons and plays it as a live stream, if you're talking about podcasts like Adventure Zone that originally started out playing Dungeons & Dragons, that really spurred on a new generation of interest in it following 5th edition's launch, it's kind of hard to say that those didn't have an impact on the number of people that are playing now, because there was a portion of time where you just didn't hear about D&D so much. There was a big surge back in like the 70s and 80s, and then I don't know, was it like the 90s? I keep feeling like around the 90s. I don't
know.
During the 90s, I didn't hear like much of anything about it. There was like the Satanic Panic in the 80s, and then there was like this lull for a while, and then. But the time that I really started to see it become more of a mainstream was really after 5th edition, and seeing it being streamed, podcasts being put up on it, and a lot of actual discussion being done about it. And part of that was indeed third-party content. I've played in games online that were based on third-party content for D&D. That's stuff that is essentially at risk if something were to happen to change the framework of Open Gaming License. We will probably have more information about that. We're gonna want to talk to a few people about it, and maybe some of the folks that are involved will have more information, and some of the third party.
Get to read it ourselves. I don't have time for that.
Maybe we will get to read it ourselves, because as we went to record this episode, we saw some new stuff coming out where people were giving the actual text, or at least what we think is. Yes.
Leaked, alleged text.
Which
so,
may be draft material, and we don't necessarily know if it's going to be the final agreement, which again is the reason why we're not going into it right now. But as that develops, and maybe when we get some people that will be able to clarify it better for us, we will talk about it further on the show. But I thought it would just be useful to tell anybody who's not familiar with the Open Gaming License exactly what it is and maybe what's on the line if things change in the new system.
Yeah.
So, if you have any concerns or information that you'd like to share, the best to your ability, please make sure to leave it in the comments, and we'll be interested to see what you think and your take on the situation.
Or if you don't want to put it in the comments, leave us an email. Tell us to make it anonymous.
Yeah, if you don't want any of your comments to be out there, or you want to be anonymous, but you want to tip us off to something that we might want to discuss further on the show at some point, you can send us an email. It's totalpebbleknockdown@gmail.com.